Hi, everybody. I'm Lindsay Ray, and welcome to my COM 3305 Communication Law final presentation. And for this presentation, I studied and researched TikTok copyright infringement. And my email is at the bottom in case you have any questions throughout this, while we will have a questions portion at the end. So I just want to give a brief rundown of the table of contents. So on slide 3, we're going to have what this topic means to me, where I will lightly touch on what this topic means to me and where I got it from and how I came to the conclusion to want to research this more. On page 4, we're going to have my research questions that I put in my proposal and where I will briefly talk about why I chose them and detail a little bit on them. On page 5, I will have my literature review of my 5 scholarly articles I chose during the proposal that helped me build my argument as well as build my case for my argument. And I will also have my existing knowledge on the topic, which we will also lightly touch on my existing knowledge on page 3. On page 6, I will have my argument for why I chose this topic as well as my argument with the topic. On page 7 and 8, I will discuss the 3 main components of this argument and things to think about with the argument. And then we will also talk about a little bit more on discussion page 2, which is slide 8, about things that I want to do and things that I learned while researching. On page 9, we will talk about the conclusion and next steps that I see for the future in building and continuing this research. And then on page 10, I'll have my work cited from my 5 scholarly articles. And on page 11, I will ask for your questions. So, as for what this topic means to me, I chose this topic because personally, I'm a musician in Nashville, Tennessee, and I have worked hand in hand with the copyright agency as well as read the laws for copyright. And I have also seen royalties be a pain and how little they count and how much they do mean when you get them. I'm personally invested because I know that how hard musicians work on their art and how much they deserve the time and effort and the money payment for how hard they work, and they work day and night. And social media platforms like TikTok that are newer can actually cause damage to their careers when they aren't getting royalties or the credit for their music. So as for my research questions that I proposed in my proposal, we have question 1, which is, why are the largest TikTokers making millions of dollars each year, but when musicians' songs get used millions of times on TikTok, do they not see any revenue in return? So why are videos getting over 1 million streams and 128 million views, but we're seeing no royalty return for the hard work that musicians put in? For question 2, does TikTok have to request a license for each and every song they allow on their app in order to allow millions of people to use it? So what is TikTok's guidelines and what rules and regulations do they have in place thus far for the safety of musicians? Question 3, how can we solve copyright infringement on TikTok and other social media apps? I think that question is fairly self-explanatory, and we're going to talk about that later on in my discussion slides. So as for the literature reviews, I want to take just a second and talk about my 5 scholarly articles that I chose for the argument and to help me research. So for the first article, we have one by James Eastman, which breaks down the modern idea of copyright infringement, as well as to how lawyers and the government is going to go about handling copyright infringement cases or cases of potential copyright. For example, one of the ones that Eastman talks about is the blurred lines debate, where an older musician found that blurred lines actually had a small snippet or sound the same as his song he wrote over 20 years ago. For the second article, discusses Music Modernization Act, which is an act that Trump actually signed in 2018, where he updates copyright rules a little bit more for social media, but we will talk about that also in the discussion slides. And then for the third article by Eric Priest, talks about the aspect of record labels streaming, sending audio recordings to streaming services and platforms, and how the Copyright Collective defends them and protects them. We will talk about the Copyright Collective as well in the discussion slides. And for my fourth article, I did an article by Tracy L. Riley, which states how digital sampling can be troubling because you have to make sure all the boxes are checked and all the laws are correct in order to use even a small snippet of somebody else's art or work. For my fifth and final source, I did an article by Alexa Walker, who talks about judgment made in particular cases that would end up having implications or additional damages awarded if you were caught doing copyright infringement. With all of these resources and authors being taken into consideration, I feel as if these help me support my claim for my argument. So as for my argument, I have given you an in-depth kind of explanation for my argument, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a shorter one. But please take the time to read this slide and get the full idea of my argument. In this presentation, I really want to defend musicians as well as protect them from copyright infringement. Musicians work day and night for their art and their love of their passion, so they should get all the love and all the money they deserve for their work. So by putting in just a little bit more law or rules and regulations on these newer social media platforms, I think it would greatly benefit musicians. So let's talk about the discussion. During my research, I found three main components that really added in to help me build my argument and discussion. First, we're going to talk about royalties. So royalties are a very small sliver of money that musicians get each and every time their song is streamed. So I'm actually going to jump to the bottom little bullet point here and talk about ASCAP really briefly. ASCAP is a company or legal thing that all musicians use. So I have personally used ASCAP in the past for my recordings, and ASCAP actually keeps up with the data, your royalties, and making sure that they're all coming in from the correct places and that you are not being copywritten. I also learned that musicians can be sued for as simple as a 3-note sequence in a song that could sound like somebody else's song. So if you have the same little piano sound as another song, you can actually be sued for copyright. You can take it to court and battle that copyright, but it's important to note that when writing music. The Music Modernization Act, I want to talk really briefly on it, that it was signed in 2018 by Trump, who helped update copyright and sort of copyright infringement laws to protect musicians for more up-to-date social medias and streaming platforms. I briefly want to talk about copyright as well, which is my second thing that helped me build my argument. Copyright collectives are a group of people who basically, when you copyright something, they are your like lawyers who protect you and keep you safe from copyright infringement. So copyright collectives are very important, and Priest touches on that in his scholarly article. Digital streaming copyright is an everyday battle for musicians. I've struggled with it personally, and I've heard my song being used once before, and I did not give the approval for it. Spotify currently has 70 billion audio digital recordings of music on their app. That's 70 billion chances for something to be copywritten illegally. So take that into consideration when thinking about TikTok and the sounds you hear daily. Sampling. I want to talk about Kanye West's song's Famous that uses Bomb Bomb by Sister Nancy at the beginning. He had to go through all these laws and regulations and permissions in order to be able to even use the beginning of that in his song Famous. So he is being protected from copyright infringement by going about it correctly. Think of sampling as if somebody were to go in your desk and borrow a pen and never give it back. That is sampling. They take it and they don't give it back, but they use your small interval in order to get profit. TikTok is the same way. They use a 30-second interval of your song in order to take your money. And then for discussion part 1, I want to talk about my approach for solving these issues, which would be to talk directly to TikTok and these larger platforms in order to have them add in rules and regulations and things that would be important to protect musicians. And I would also like to write lawmakers personally and show them how much it means to musicians that they are protected by the laws that lawmakers make. And for the discussion, I want to talk about how TikTok should update their terms and conditions to pay artists if they reach a certain amount of plays or streams. So if they reach over 1.5 million views, they should start collecting royalties because their song is being used that many times. And if not, the musician should have the opportunity to get them for copyright infringement of using their song without permission or credit. And then I want to talk about the conclusion and what I see next. I would like to see researchers as well as musicians do more in-depth research on these new social media platforms and ideas like TikTok. The research led me to study what laws that the government can put in place that could potentially protect musicians. I would like to see more scholarly articles also released. And this is my works cited page. I'm sorry, it took a second to load, but this is it with the 5 scholarly articles. And now I would like to thank you for watching, and as well as allow you to ask me any questions you may have, and feel free to email me with any further questions. Thank you so much for listening.